Welcome, everybody, to the Heart of the Artist. I am so excited today. I'm Whisper Poet and bringing you the second half of our first year. We've had a month hiatus. We took the month of July off, and so happy to be back. Catalyst in the co host slot over there. What's up, my girl? There she is. And we got Poet Sophia Falco helping us out today, running tech. And our special guest is Kelly Mary McAllister. Kelly, welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
So glad to have you on the show. You and I have not been in spaces together many times. And every time I'm with you, I just absolutely love your words. I love your energy. I love your message. You have such a wonderful, beautiful, approachable style, and you're real. You share your journey, you share your pain, you share your trauma, but somehow you leave us feeling uplifted. That's a special gift to be able to share trauma and leave the people feeling like, hey, I'm okay with me and I'm okay with the world. Talk about your approach.
Thank you. Um, I think that a lot of that is intentional. So when I write, I started writing because I've had mental health issues my whole life. And people have always said you should journal. Journaling's great. But I would journal and then all the things that I hated in my head, I would just hate on the page. And it didn't leave me feeling better. But I found that if I started trying to craft them into something, to build them into something that was either beautiful or exquisite, then I was in a place where I was actively engaging with what I was trying to say as opposed to just dumping negativity. And the more I did that, and the more I got into that place and started exploring form and content, and then I started doing slams and started exploring spoken word and all of the things that go into performance poetry. It really gave me a framework to explore the things that I had been dealing with and the deep specificity of it. And what I found strangely is that the more specific I am in my poems and the more honest I am in that specificity, the more relatable they become. The more I make bland, trite nonsense, more people are like, lovely platitudes, moving on. But the more I'm like, hey, let's talk about this one real bad thing, the more people are like, I had a similarly but different but similar bad thing. And there's relatability to that. And so it really comes full circle. I get as much from it as I hope I give from it.
I love the whole ethos of what you're talking about. Can you go into some specifics, maybe share a specific poem and break it down, or just kind of give us some more detail? Because this is really good stuff here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have one piece that I think is a good case study on that. Let me pull it up quickly. It's one of my spoken word pieces. And the thing with a lot of mental health conversations I find is that they either come from a place that is the before, where it's so depressing you can't find your way out of it. And I don't want to exacerbate that for myself or anyone else. I don't want to write a poem. That's not to say I haven't, and I won't again, but I don't like or enjoy writing poems that are just darkness because that is the lie that my mind tells me. And if I'm trying to find the truth of a situation, I have to look past the lies that my mind is telling me. But I also don't want to write from that place of healing where you've gotten past the issue and you're like, it's all going to be wonderful. Just you wait, because that's patronizing and pointless. And that's not helpful either. And so I try to write from that real middle space where you're recognizing the reality of the overwhelming place that you feel, but you're also recognizing that there is light, even if it's light you have to seek, and like you have to punch holes in the cover that's coming there. And so this is a poem that I wrote that is sort of in that direction. Let me see, where are you? La 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 la. I write too many poems, it's hard to find them. Here it is. Okay. This one is called The Web I Weave. And it is predominantly one of my slam poems, so it's a little bit punchier. I know that I cannot trust my own mind. It's always spinning, scenarios where I'm never winning, always starting over, just beginnings, a game of baseball, endless innings. I'm so tired from all this spinning. I'm dizzy and despondent, never knowing up from down because I'm down all the time. Even when I'm smiling, say I'm fine. It's just a line. We know I'm lying. I'm lying around, stuck to the ground. The morning's so hard to greet, stand on my own 2 feet. When I'm browbeat by the day to day, get up, slave away, go to bed, and repeat. What's the point of this feat? Most days I'd rather just sleep. But aye, there's the rub, the cost is pretty steep. For in the sleep of death, what dreams may come? I'm stuck in that dreaming. On those days of endless sleeping, the dreamy wanderings of the unconscious, not the conscious dreams of achieving, not some goals that I can believe in, just nonsense that I struggle leaving. I'm drifting through my own life, my thoughts just spinning. So I make like a spider and I spin myself a web and I anchor it to you all for the days I'd rather be dead. A strand of silken web is anchored to my mother, her body my first home, her heartbeat my first song. And though this life feels so long, I know that it is wrong for a parent to bury a child, the pain of my arrival dwarfed by a premature end. Another leads to my father, to the feet I once stood on to dance around the living room when I was just a wee one. Now our feet are the same size, but I still follow in his footprints. When the going gets too hard, I can lean on his innate goodness. Many lead to my nieces, the ones I held, tiny babes whose chubby cheeks are giving way to missing teeth and lanky legs, who let me sometimes see the world through the magic of their eyes that still light up when they see me. That's a reason to survive. My best friend grabbed onto her strands. She knows that they are there. She listens when I need her, even though it makes her scared. And I've stuck strands on people's backs over long and lazy brunches, and all my aunts and uncles and cousins, I've got relations by the bunches. I've even got strands here in this room with him and her and them and you. All the people who can listen to the stories I've been through, who can nod in understanding and say, yeah, I've been there too. That connection is important. I've got strands on all you too. So when the darkness comes, when the floor drops from below, I don't have to fear the fall. This web won't let me get too low. I'll be safe there till the morning when another day is new. Watch the sunrise pierce the dark, the sky and I regain our hues. I cannot trust my mind. I know enough that that is true. But when I cannot trust myself, I've got a web that's made of you. Um, yeah, that's one of my favorite pieces. And it started on a really, really dark night. I was I was really struggling and I've always struggled with suicidal ideation. And suicidal ideation is so hard to talk about because it scares the people that you love. It scares you. And it's hard to talk about even in a mental health context because when you talk to people about it, they get so worried about your safety that they get really extreme in their responses. And that's an absolutely understandable thing. But when you live with suicidal ideation, it's almost banal. It's just a thing that you think about with a lot of frequency. And I didn't know how and you know you get so used to it, but then when the dark comes and it really crashes over you like a wave, you have to give up on everything except survival. And I was thinking like, well, what is the survival? And it's just the like the idea of these threads that I have stuck to people where I'm not living for myself in those moments because I can't. I'm living for the people that I love, the people that I've anchored myself to. And I can pull on those anchors. I don't have to tell them that I'm using them. I don't have to engage them in the scary part, but I can pull on those relationships and those tethers and I can hold myself here with those. And so I started writing a piece around that. But first I had to start with the feeling of shit, this sucks. Like, like what am I struggling with? I had to dig the hole before I could demonstrate how hard it is to climb out of the hole. But then I also had to show that the tethers themselves, they're built over time. They're not short-term things. Like, when people have a mental health crisis and people reach out and say, I'm here for you. That's great. That's lovely. That is a great instinct. But it's the people who have shown up for you time and time and time again, who have demonstrated through their actions that they are there and that they're not going anywhere. Those are the people that you can really rely on, and it's outside of the moment. And so I wanted to craft something that really brought together that the immediacy of the pain and the longevity of the tether. And then I love to rhyme. I love rhyme so much. I've been
Your
called a very
rhyming
depressing Dr.
scheme
Seuss.
is just wonderful. I don't know of anyone else that has your unique cadence and ability with rhyme. It's wonderful.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
mean, I want to give you flowers on that whole poem. That poem to me was like the perfect scone, slightly sweet, but not too sweet, the
Hmm.
perfect texture that you can really like sink your teeth into and have some substance. It's not light and airy like cake. It's like this
Hmm.
lovely, dense, wonderful, delicious scone. And I could just eat that over and over. I just snack on it, consume it. It was wonderful. And of course, thank you for the tears because that's like part of the
Oh,
hardest thing, right? I always cry. So thank you for kicking the season off right for, for
okay.
bringing the tears. But that was absolutely wonderful,
Oh,
and
thank you.
I I I totally see where you're coming from with the suicidal ideation, and your energy to me always feels so lovely and so uplifting, and I have to wonder if your base setting is is kind of a positive glass half full kind of gal, would you say?
I think I land in a place where I've had a glass that has felt so empty for so long that I've had to become very purposeful in recognizing what fills it.
Ew, yes.
And so that's a practice that I've had to sort of engage in, because it's been very easy to look at the empty part of the glass and to dwell on that. But glasses are made to be filled and then emptied and then washed and then filled again. And I just have to figure out what I'm putting in the damn glass, because it can't just sit there empty or I'm going to lose it.
Do you remember the first time that consciously happened for you, where you made that decision of I'm not going to dwell in the negative. I'm going to look at the positive, and this is what it is.
I think it was slow going. I have I've been in therapy in some permutation since I was essentially 14 years old. Even though my issues started when I was probably even 11. And so it has been a whole lifespan for me. But when I was 20, I had a really bad major depressive episode. And to get somewhat specific, I have what they call double depression, on top of some other fun diagnoses. Double depression is dysthymia, which is consistent chronic low mood, coupled with a tendency to major depressive episodes. And so this was my first one. Well, this was not my first one, but this was the first one that I was on my own. I was at school. I was dealing with a lot of things. I was dealing with undiagnosed ADHD, and it got overwhelming. And so I ended up going to a mental health institution here. My parents brought me because they didn't know what else to do with me, and um things at home were not great. And my sister was the one that sort of threw down the gauntlet and was like, we're not doing this anymore as a family. It's not going to happen this way. And she's this tiny little, like, 5'2" peacekeeper. And she just was like, no, it's not happening. You're shaping up. Like, she put my family into their roles and was like, you need to do better. Everyone needs to do better. And that was sort of like I'm not fighting this battle alone kind of feeling, which I hadn't felt until that point, because mental illness is so isolating. And so that was one of the first journeys. And then it was slow. Like, I got myself a kitten. I needed a positive something. And there's something so life affirming about a kitten or a puppy just this new little fluffy creature. It's less onerous than a baby because babies can bring the same sort of joy, but babies also have this whole like, who will you become? What intergenerational trauma do you carry in your genes? But with a puppy, you're just like, you're so fluffy. And I really and I gathered into that. But I would say I settled into it after my brain stopped cooking. So at like 25 to 26, I got a really good consistent job, which makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
I had insurance, so I was able to go to regular therapy, which makes a huge difference. I
Yes.
got on good medication, which makes a huge difference.
Yes.
And I learned to advocate for myself within a system that really requires self-advocacy.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to stay on top of my meds and change them and modify them as things have sort of come up and as different life events have happened. It's been a really shitty last few years with me. I've been dealing with arthritis, which severely limited my mobility. So I was isolated and in my home and dealing with disability, a physical disability. And it was just, I really had to lean on the tools that I had to keep going. And poetry was a huge part of that for me because it lets me take the things out of my mind and then examine them as if they're objects
Yeah.
and then give them that context.
Is there, do you find comfort in the poetry community and your group of poetry friends in terms of, and I don't know about yours, but it seems like, we all broke and we all broke together. And it's
Hmm.
just, kind of like just very comforting there's nobody that's standing up on high and is perfect, right? We all have our
Yes.
challenges and we all just sort of support each other and love each other and
Well-adjusted, happy people don't have anything to write poetry about. I don't know what they're doing, but it's probably like meal prep or something. It's not writing sad poems while crying. But the poetry community has been incredible. Like, especially during the pandemic when I first got involved with the online scene. Um, oh, did I freeze? Oh no, I'm back. Okay.
yes.
When I first got involved with the online scene, uh, and I was so alone. The pandemic was so isolating. Some people were trapped in houses with their families, just going stir crazy because if they had to see their brother's face one more time, they were going to scream. But I had the opposite problem where I was trapped completely myself. And so the poetry community was a lifeline when I needed one. It's also shown me so much about the world and about other people and broadened my circle and my understanding of the world and myself. And I'm so grateful to be a part of the Toronto slam scene because I've said this 1,000 times. It's so supportive. Like it's so lovely. Competitors cheer for each other. People are constantly giving each other kudos and flowers. And there's just, are we competing? Yes. But we're also just so thrilled to be in a space where the art is being recognized and uplifted, that there's a
Yeah.
real sense of community and camaraderie there, which is a lovely experience.
It sounds absolutely wonderful. And you're kind of segueing nicely because I wanted to ask you about
Mhm.
slam. I've not had the experience of slam, and it's something I'm sort of infinitely curious about. Do you differentiate between your pieces that you perform in a slam setting versus pieces that you do as sort of spoken word versus your page poetry, or do you all
I
mix and match?
There's a few poems that work as both,
Mhm.
but there are a lot of poems that I find I either put in one bucket or the other.
Mhm.
My experience with slam is entirely Shocky's fault, so I'm glad you're here, Shocky, so I can blame you once again. You can defend yourself in the chat, but it doesn't matter. It's all your fault. Um, it was something I was considering, and she really encouraged me to give it a try, so I did. And for me, it's sort of I went to a performing arts high school, and my specialty was always just in the talking, the hosting, the improv, the speaking. I'm a terrible actress. I'm not good at being anyone other than myself. And like I can't do it. I have too strong a personality. I can't shed it.
I kind
But
of feel you. I'm with you on that.
right? It's so hard to turn it off. But I missed that stage aspect and the pageantry and the drama of it. And so this was a great opportunity to take the writing that I'd been doing and to take some of the pieces and to modify them because everyone has a different style and a lot of slam is very political. There's a lot of people who are very loud, and that's just not my style. So I had to sort of figure out what my style was. And I landed on this almost Seussian kind of bopping style where it's just sort of it's relatively quick, it's a lot of rhyme, and it's very heavy topics done in a very light style so
Mhm.
that they're a little bit more accessible. And
Scones.
I've found some success with that.
You have scones.
Scones, yes, I will call it the scone style.
So, what was your first slam like? What went through your mind in the lead up to that, and then when you actually were on stage?
My first slam was interesting. I actually won it.
Yeah.
Yes, I haven't won one since. It was total beginner's luck. I generally come like third. Third is my sweet spot. But I won my first one, and I was so intimidated because the other poets knew each other. They had that camaraderie. They were cheering for each other, and they were so good. Like the stuff they were putting on stage was so good. And I was were very, very emotional, and I was worried about my ability to get through them. And I won't lie, the first one, I definitely cried. I felt like I finished it and I barely made it to the end. It was a poem that I'd written, and I hadn't actually thought about it as a slam poem. But Shockey told me that of all my pieces, that was the one that she most resonated with, and that she thought that would make a great slam poem. So I gave it a shot and it paid off. And the second was about an almost sexual assault that I had experienced. You know, that gray area where bad behavior has taken place, but it's not necessarily criminal, where so many men seem to dwell in this and then play. Yeah, and then they just like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. Okay. I'm not having you arrested, but you're still a shitty person. And I got really fired up on the second one. And I think that the authenticity of my emotional response to the pieces, the road that's lit with gaslights. Yes, that is a phrase. That is a prompt. Um, and, um, and everyone was so welcoming and so supportive. And when it was done, everybody wanted to talk and to invite me to more slams and to include me in the community. And I'd been so nervous going in that it just felt like this catharsis, like all of my muscles relaxed at the same time. And I was hooked, unfortunately. And then it becomes a sickness.
It sounds like an absolutely lovely, affirming experience. How wonderful that you had that.
It was, and I've seen other people come out and come to the slams as newer artists, and they get the same response. They get the same welcome. And it's just such a lovely, positive place to be in, especially when so much of art involves art criticism. And there's a
Mhm.
time and a place for that. There absolutely is. But there's something nice about people just recognizing the vulnerability that it takes to put your words on a stage like that, to put your words into the world, and to choose to uplift that and to put their inner critic to the side. And I
Well,
and I
kudos to
appreciate that.
Shockey, since you're in the room. Kudos to Shockey for recognizing that she needed to encourage you in that direction.
Oh yeah, she's a big softie. Shocky talks tough, but she's a big softie.
So you're doing the slam.
Mhm,
You do spoken word. You're
mhm,
in some of the non-slam places,
mhm,
but you also have like a coaching platform or?
I'm part of the Six Poets Society, which is based here in Toronto.
Mhm,
So we also do some events here in the city, but we also do an online workshop every Tuesday, every second and fourth Tuesday of the month. We do a generative workshop.
mhm,
And then under the same banner, Keneal and Ram, two other members, every Monday night they do Music Mondays, which is on Instagram Live and fantastic. If you haven't checked it out, follow Poetry Battles or Ramrock Speaks. Um, and it's just it's interesting. We're talking about other ventures that we could be doing that I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and discuss what they are yet. But they're just it's a great local community, and I love doing the generative workshops. I love challenging myself to sort of come up with a different angle to explore that we haven't explored yet. Those are absolutely free. I'll throw the link in the chat if anybody wants to join us. They're on Zoom. Second and fourth Tuesday, you're always welcome to come. And then you get 3 to 4 prompts. We call them little seeds that we're planting, and then you can decide whether to water them or not at a later time.
nice. Talk about that intersection between the online group of people you interact with, and then having some of those people cross over into real life. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I don't know about you, for me, there was a surreal quality to that that's
Yes.
really wonderful. So talk a little bit about that.
It's very interesting. I sort of fell into it backwards because I was looking for somewhere that was local, and Ram had organized this open mic at a bar, and I'd interacted with some of these people online before, but I hadn't known it. And so I ended up at this mic with my friend being like super awkward and strange. Because it's always awkward when you're in a new environment and you don't know anyone and you're like, hello, fellow poetry people. Do you poet? I poet. Awesome. I'm gonna get a drink before this gets weirder. And again, it was such a lovely space. Everyone was so excited to invite new people there. And now that we do more and more events, especially because Ram's got such a great online presence, he brings in so many people that I know their screen names and I don't know their real names. And so you'll be talking to someone and making small talk, and then it'll be like, oh, I know you. Yeah, I know your work. I love your work. And it's just, I think it's fascinating, and it's so life affirming, and it really for me solidifies the understanding that online spaces are just a new geography. I have this pet theory that what we will discover as we move forward is that the internet is like a new level of society, because we used to just have ourselves and then our family units, and then family units grew to hunter-gatherer tribes, became towns and settlements, and then they became cities, and then cities became states, and then states became countries, and then countries became all of these different ways that we interacted with each other, but all of them were geographical. And now we have this environment where we can connect with people, we can form little communities, but we're doing it in a way that defies geography. And so it's like a new level to society. And then we take the things that we learn, and we take the norms we've established in these online societies, and we filter them back into our real societies. And so we're impacting our geographical communities at the same time as we're creating our online communities. And it flows sort of back and forth that way. And I just think it's going to have a profound impact on our understanding of how we organize ourselves as human beings. And I think artists absolutely have a huge role to play in that, because we disseminate thought. That's how we metabolize it and how we understand it. We're sort of like, we take all the ingredients around us, the politics that's taking place, the current events that are taking place, the feelings that are taking place, and we combine them like ingredients, and then we bake them into something and we serve it to people. And as people eat that, it it enters them, it
It
changes
makes them
them.
better people.
Hopefully it makes them better people. Sometimes I've seen art that makes people worse, and I hope we're not trying to create that. Um, but for better or for worse, it changes people.
Yeah,
And I think that that is a sacred responsibility.
absolutely. I I I love all of that. And I agree with what you're saying. It is kind of a we're on the ground floor of creating our own little utopia in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, of pushing society to be better, because that's all we can ever do. A utopia is a journey, not a destination. You'll never land on it because people don't stay the same. And so if we continually just try to create and improve and better, then we're always moving in a positive direction, if never landing on the spot we really want to be.
You know, it's really interesting because in the work that I do, it's a, you know, large corporate, and they're very much all, you know, talking about the value of diversity. And we
Mhm,
do, we are a very diverse company, but we all work remotely. We
mhm,
don't socialize with each other. We don't sit down and eat with each other. I don't you know, I don't really know any of the people that I work with than my people on my team, and we don't socialize. We do work stuff and leave.
mhm,
This is diversity. You know, our poetry community, and all
mhm.
of us interacting with each other from all over the world and every walk of life and every culture and race and religion and creed and everything. This is diversity.
Absolutely.
And it's just kind of funny, because people who are not in any of these spaces, you know, maybe they think they're in a diverse situation, but I didn't realize that I wasn't until I was
Mm.
here, and then taking everything in that all of these spaces have to offer and reveling in it
Yes,
and marveling at how much I have learned about other people's points of view and ways of life, and being so grateful and thankful for that.
absolutely. I think that one of the things that we miss when we look at diversity strictly from a workplace context is that there are things that you can't bring to work. Like in a workplace, you generally don't talk about the divisive things because they are divisive.
Right.
But in a poetry context, you're supposed to talk about the divisive things because they're interesting and because they're meaty and because they're sticky and difficult. And that's where poetry lives. And by sort of like chewing on that and taking turns and having to listen to other people, even when you don't necessarily want to, has really created for me not just this idea of a great diversity of thought, but also the expectation that it is my responsibility to give other people a platform and a chance to tell me things that I have a responsibility to listen. And I think sometimes that gets lost when you're in an environment where you're not having the meaty conversation. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm really grateful because I work for a nonprofit that's very local. And because of the nature of our work, we often have to have those divisive conversations. We have difficult conversations with our donors, we have difficult conversations with each other. And that has been such an interesting practice. And poetry has made me so much stronger at that. And you know what also has improv? Improv, so helpful.
Talk about that.
It's the yes and principle. I mean, you can get it from Tina Fey's book. Like she does a great job. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler both have really nice beach reads. You can read them on the beach. They're funny. I recommend them as memoirs go. But it's the yes and principle. So like when I'm talking to someone and they have an opinion that is miles away from mine, the temptation to just scream, "You're wrong," cover my ears and run away is always there. And that's the most dramatic response. I know that most adults would not respond that way, but we do in a less dramatic way. We tend to just write them off as wrong and then proceed as if they had not spoken at all. Whereas I find if I meet them halfway, if I find something about their statement that I can agree with, even if it's simply their motivation, you know, I'm also really concerned about that issue, then we can find some common ground. And if I can take that yes and approach and say, you know, I hear what you're saying. It's definitely a scary time to be alive. Um, and here is my perspective on it. What do you think of that? Or to ask them more questions. So rather than go straight to my own perspective, start pivoting to, well, what makes you think that? And, what are you basing that off of? And, when did you start thinking that? Has that been a lifelong belief, or is that something relatively new? Like really digging into it with them creates a dialogue and an understanding. And you might get to the point where you realize that this has happened to me too often. You're arguing the same side. You're just doing it from with different semantics. And we get so caught up in those semantics that we treat each other like adversaries. When the reality is that the majority of people on this planet want to do good, or at least actively do not want to do bad.
Right.
And we just need to find what's causing the difference there. Also, again, therapy speak. I've done it for too long. It is ingrained in my bones. It is a problem. But it's that idea of what's going to be productive here. Um, my grandfather, who died when I was very young, but my dad always says that my grandfather used to say that whenever you're faced with a problem, the first thing you have to decide is what does the solution look like? And then every decision you make has to lead to that solution. Otherwise, it's the wrong decision. And so if you're talking to someone and your end goal looks like harmony, well, how are we making decisions that lead to true harmony? What does the solution to that look like? And am I making that in this conversation? Because telling them to, F off and never speak to me again might be good for my mental health. And sometimes that might be the harmony I'm looking for. That might be the peace I require. But if that's not the end goal that I'm moving towards, what do I have to do instead? And try something else.
Absolutely. And I love that whole idea of people gradually moving closer to each other by
Mhm.
virtue of discourse and dialogue and holding space for each other's feelings and just recognizing that, we're all human and we're all broken.
And the poetry community is so lovely at that. Like I've learned so much patience from the poetry community, and not in an indulgent, patronizing way, but in a very human, reciprocity way. This is what I would like, so this is what I must grant. And I think that that's really interesting. There was another thought that I had, but it ran away. They do that sometimes.
Absolutely. So talk about your genesis as a writer. When
Mm.
did that all begin for you?
Like most people, I wrote a lot when I was young. I would always get stuck though at the beginning. I like beginnings more than endings. I am the type of person where I'm terrible for not finishing a TV series. I'll watch it to like the penultimate episode and then just be like, I'm good. Especially with like reality shows. I love watching the first 6 episodes of a reality show and then never going back to it.
I
I would
love
do
that
that
you
as a
you
kid.
just used the word penultimate. Kudos, gold star for you. Love it, love it.
Thank you. It's my favorite word. Um, but like I really loved creating characters and people. And that was all I ever ended up doing. And then I thought that, well, like I'm not a writer because writers actually write stories and I just write character descriptions. And I had a really great teacher who really instilled in me that I could write, that I knew what I was doing and that I should keep doing it. But the noise in my head was so loud that I didn't. And then I got an ADHD diagnosis and I started ADHD meds. And it was like for the first time, the noise stopped. It wasn't that the content wasn't there. It's that I couldn't separate it from all the other nonsense that was going on. And once I started taking the meds and sort of treating the issue, I found I was able to sit down and actually do things. Like during 1 month of the pandemic, I wrote a YA novel just, for fun because I could. And I hadn't been able to do that before. And I realized that all those character sketches that I was writing was just an attempt to understand human behavior, and that poetry is a flip side of that. It's an attempt, at least in myself, with the same clarity that I understand these characters.
Yeah.
And I think the great mystery of being a human being is we think we know so much about ourselves and that we are so in control of what we do and how we react. And in reality, there's so much about our behavior that's driven by our physiology, that's driven by our lizard brains, that is outside of our control. And we surprise ourselves constantly. And we can just, some people justify it. They find a way to justify their own behaviors. But I'm constantly amazed with the ways I surprise myself and disappoint myself and overachieve myself. And I think that poetry is a great way to really try to get to know the unknowable, yourself. You'll never fully know yourself. And this is one way to get a little closer to that end goal.
So, what was the first piece that you wrote that you recognize as being your first poem?
Ooh, that I actually have. I have that poem.
Yes.
I wrote it years and years ago, and I just felt compelled to write it down. And I wrote it just as blah. There was no formatting, there was no nothing. I didn't recognize it as a poem. It was just something that lived in the notes app on my phone for a very long time. And then when I started doing poetry, I went back and I looked at it and I was like, damn, this is a poem. Like all I have to do is put in line breaks. And I've even got stanzas here. I've got repetition, I've got flow. And with very, very minimal editing, I was able to turn it into a poem that I still have. I think I put it in the collection that I'm releasing this summer, well, this month, at the end of this month. Um, and it's interesting to see that come full circle.
So, you want to read it?
Yeah, sure, I can find it. She's, let me see. Let's see. You are called baggage. There you are.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay. So this started as just a bit of nonsense. In amongst some unfinished to-do lists. Oh no, this is not the version that I want. I want this version. La 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 la. I have too many poems. You know when you put them in one big thing, and every time you look at them, you're just overwhelmed with how much of it there is.
Yeah, that's its own, that's like its own show or workshop of, everybody sharing how they organize their poems.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
You should do that.
Okay, here we go. In amongst the unfinished to-do lists, endless candy wrappers, the crumbs of pastries I didn't even like, but in amongst the pens still full of the ink not used to write the thoughts still stuck in my full head, in amongst the books and books and books, all finished and read over and over and over, and piled like travel guides for trips already taken. In amongst the hairpins and safety pins and push pins with blood long dried from years of self-harm and the empty bottles of pills once taken. In amongst this flotsam are the dreams I once had. All of this detritus floats amongst the tears that I cried with my head in my bag while calling a muffled, "It's just allergies, no worries," to concerned passerbys, unlucky enough to have been seated on the subway nearby. I think I shoved my heart somewhere in there, amongst the junk, the garbage, the treasures, but it's lost at the bottom and I can never find it when I need it. I'm considering having a spare maid to leave with a trusted friend, but I'm worried I lost it for good this time. This baggage is heavy. I thought my shoulders had grown wider and my back stronger and the weight familiar. I thought I had finally learned how to carry it. But I have ripped a seam again. I have ripped a seam again. So I must rush to repair it before my past and myself spill out on the floor of this subway car and I get gum on my soul.
Gum on my soul. Yes. I love that line.
I love a good ending line. It's my favorite.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Gum on my soul. That's like its own poem.
Oh, that it is. It's a good prompt. It's a good prompt. I wrote this other piece called Just Do It, and it's got possibly my favorite final line I've ever written. Every time I do it, there's just like a hush. And I'm like, yes, yes, it landed.
Okay, you gonna tease us or are you gonna
No,
share?
I can do that one. I probably do that one from memory. There it is. Okay. Exercise only works if it hurts. It's the pain that burns those calories. The internal combustion engine of the body is your suffering. Go harder. Your tears should slide down your flushed cheeks, salt mingling with salt, an alchemy of perspiration and pain that makes your pump more potent. You should feel no joy. If you feel a moment of joy, don't. Health is beauty. Beauty is pain, so pain must be health. There's no room for joy in health. You can find joy in joy when you've destroyed the fat, when you've earned it. You don't look like you've earned it yet. Food is only fuel, not a pleasure, not a pleasant experience, but a penance, a punishment. If it's good for you, it should taste like sand, disintegrating in your mouth into tasteless particle pieces. If you're not hungry for this, then you're not really hungry, are you? If you cannot fit into your pants, if the buckle won't latch on your belt, you should buckle down, buck up, make yourself less, eat less, be less. No one will love you unless you fit into those pants. To buy a new pair is to admit defeat. To accept your features is fine. To accept a futile future is fat. To fool yourself into the fantasy that others don't see your flaws, you can't ever let them see your flaws, so close your jaws. Diet or you'll die of it. Roll the dice with the vice of it. Don't you know that the last one standing had the life most worth living? Don't you know that the trophy at the end of it all is the smallest coffin?
What? Shut the front door. Yes.
I
The
love that line so much.
smallest coffin. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was, I find my best pieces tend to come out like vomit. Like there's the ones I sit down and I write intentionally and intellectually and I have a point that I want to say, but like my favorite pieces are the ones I just sit down and I'm like, I have feelings and words, feelings and words. And that was definitely a feelings and words one.
Every time I hear you share one of your ones about weight loss and being overweight and being a big girl and all the things, because I'm
Mhm.
right there. I am in that space, and I have a foku, um, and it's like this: my value as a woman
Mhm.
inversely proportional to the size of my jeans.
Yes.
And I think of that piece whenever I hear you read those, because it always brings me back to that. Talk about that as being a poet, being in spaces.
Mhm.
Does having these feelings ever affect you of being able to convey your message, to perform, to get up in front of people, to do you out there on the stage, virtual or in person?
I find it's been the opposite. It's made it easier. I think especially when it comes to like my size. I, of course, have a very, like most people who ended up large, have a very storied journey of parental interference and the world's cruelty and gym class nightmares and just people yelling things out car windows at you and people coming up to you at the gym and like just so much shame, so much shame that it was baked into my very core. Like I hated myself and I felt worthless. And the shame was just so overwhelming. And like mental illness, it's so isolating. You feel like it's just you, that you are a monster, that you are not good enough. And you can't let anyone see that. And so, like, there's this weird dance that I find a lot of people. I use the word fat. I welcome if other people don't use that word. But for me, I treat it as a neutral descriptor. It's not bad nor good. It's just what I am. Like, I have a mirror. I know what I look like, but that's not a bad thing. I'm also tall. And that I don't feel bad about being tall, so why should I feel bad about being fat? It doesn't make me a good or bad person. But I had all this shame, and as I was dealing with it, I recognized that as fat people, we try to make ourselves as small as we possibly can. Physically in spaces, we try to shrink ourselves. We tuck our elbows in. We keep our shoulders down. We often find ourselves dressing in ways with voluminous clothes, like we can disguise the size of our bodies, which is ludicrous because the world is constantly telling us that that's all it sees. And so I made this decision to fuck the shame, that I wasn't going to live with it anymore. And the first thing I did was just start calling myself fat, to own my size. Because if it's not something to be ashamed of, then I don't need to hide it. I started wearing crop tops and bikinis, and I cultivated this really amazing feed of people media of fat people doing gymnastics or rock climbing or hiking. And I started taking my dog out because I had this crippling fear of exercising in public because people yell things out car windows at you, and even the patronizing ones where they're like, keep going, and you're like, shut up and don't talk to me, I don't know you. Like, I don't need your weird encouragement, just leave me alone, stranger. And like, it's so condescending. It's well-meaning, but it's so condescending. And I got a dog and we started exercising in public, but it was when I started reading my poetry about being fat, about what it feels like in public, and having the audience engage with it. Like the thin people engaged with it. They would come up with me after and be like, that was so impactful. That was so interesting. Really well done. But it was the other fat people. It was the the girl who would sit in the second row and just like sobbed her way through one of my pieces. So much so that she didn't even come up to me after. Like she was having a moment. But that like it was impacting people. And I
Mhm.
felt less alone in that. I felt like maybe this secret shame that I carried wasn't mine and mine alone. Maybe it's a secret shame that many of us carry. And we just need some people to talk about it so we can stop hiding it, so that we have something that we can point to, that other people can point to and say, that's my experience. That's how it feels. Like, I think that's why Barbie was so popular last summer, because it was something that a lot of women who aren't well versed in feminism, it gave them a tool to go out there and say, um, that's my experience. That's how I feel. And I didn't know how to say it, but
Mhm.
that's it. I see it, I recognize it, and I can use that to tell people my story. And if my suffering, such as it is, can function in any way like that for other people, it makes it feel, if not worthwhile, at least to some extent meaningful. And that is so much healthier than just sitting and dwelling in it as this negative pit.
Absolutely. Do you get the sense, because I do the same thing with the label, right?
Mhm.
Fat
Yeah.
is a factual statement. I am
Yes.
fat. I am overweight. And I feel like when people come back to me and they say, you're not fat, you're beautiful,
Oh
right?
yeah.
It's like you just betrayed your own prejudice.
Exactly. I didn't say I wasn't beautiful.
You're the one who thinks fat isn't beautiful, and you're saying that I'm the exception.
Yes. Yes. And it's always that. Everyone is always the exception. Everyone is always the exception. Um, I i- it's always that prejudice where, and I've noticed this with a lot of people, and it happens politically as well, is people will hold a different standard for the masses than they do for the individual. So even outside of the context of fat, let's talk about something like poverty. So they might see someone struggling in their own life with addiction and think, how can I help this person?
Mhm.
You know, they know their backstory, they know what they've been through, they know they've had a hard life, and they're happy to make excuses for them. But if you were to say, we have this program that's to help all addicts, they'll be like, well, we can't encourage that behavior. And you're like, but you do encourage that behavior with the addicts you know, because you understand harm reduction when it applies to the people in your life. But it doesn't necessarily apply when you're talking about the masses. And I think that's true of so much of the politics around fatness, because they see you as a person first, and fat is just a thing about you. But when we're talking about fat people as like this weird behemoth boogeyman that's coming to ruin society and steal all the denim because our asses need it, then suddenly it becomes this idea that, well, we can't encourage that kind of behavior. And you're like, do you think that this is fun? Like, do you think that we've all just walked around and been like, you know what I love? When people call me a fat bitch while they drive down the road. It's such a wholesome experience. I'd like more of that, please. Like, there are
Well,
reasons and explanations for why everyone is the way that they are. And if we treat people with humanity and give them try to see them as much as we can, we have a better chance of helping people solve issues as opposed to just blanketly condemning them.
Well, really, if you, to me, I look at it as anything that someone does or has that is different than the norm is
Mhm,
maladaptive from the norm. Whatever the norm is going to create a problem for them in their life,
mhm,
right?
absolutely.
Anything you've got going on that is maladaptive from normative behavior is going to create a problem. And do we all think we're living our best lives trying to, deal with that here?
Well,
It's,
and I think this is such an interesting time in human history because of the internet, because of this fourth societal level that's outside of the city state, or whatever the Greek philosophy was. Because for the first time, our idea of what is normal is so expansive. We used to decide what was normal based on the, like, what, 100, 200 people we saw it regularly on a given basis. Think of like Anne of Green Gables, they had weird, quirky people, and they just chalked them up to weird, quirky people because that was easy to do because they only knew like 200 people in their entire lives. But now you can see 200 people in a day. And so our idea of normal has to get so much bigger
mhm.
than it was before. And I think we're at a place in human history where we're struggling to understand that that definition has irrevocably changed. And we haven't caught up to that yet.
And I love that you just made a statement that said normal is getting bigger.
Yes, normal's getting bigger. Yes. And I think that's fascinating. And in the same way that we watch transphobia hurt a cis woman in the boxing competition, I believe her name is Khalif, last week, um, it fat phobia also hurts thin women or athletes. Like, look at Ilona Mar, who's constantly being called a man and told that she's overweight. Overweight? She's an Olympian. I mean, yeah, she's overweight because she's like muscle. Like, that woman is getting the same discrimination I'm getting, and we're coming at it from two different angles here, but they're both harmful. And like, it's hurting all of us. So why do we keep doing it? And so I write a lot of poems about love. Like the Just Do It poem, I sat down and I thought about all the lies I was told about fitness. Because I came of age in the 90s where all of fitness was like, it's gotta hurt. If it doesn't hurt, it doesn't count. If you're not going hard enough, if your heart rate isn't pounded through the roof, it's not cardio. Like, it was just really toxic lies that, like, yoga doesn't count and dancing doesn't count and anything you might possibly enjoy doesn't count.
My statement about exercise is I prefer to sweat vicariously through others.
See, I've learned I actually like it. Like, one of the most toxic things for me is that I was a dancer when I was young. I loved movement. I
Yeah.
loved moving my body. I loved being active, but it wasn't seen as cardio enough. So it wasn't fat reducing. And it became so hard with all of the fat phobia and all of the judgment on me that I stopped doing it. And then the spaces became so hostile to me that I was scared to re-enter them.
Yeah.
That having that social media presence where I see people who look like me actively doing things is rewiring my brain so that I can actually picture myself doing them too, as opposed to that being something for other people. And I think that social media has so many toxic traits, but that, you know, from the poetry community I've been able to find to the inspiring feed that I've been able to cultivate, like, there's so many positive ways that the internet and social media have impacted my life. And yeah, I've had to be intentional about that, but it can be done and it can be utilized as that kind of tool. And I'm so grateful that it exists because if I was just stuck in the analog 90s for the rest of my life, I'd probably still just be marinating in shame like a chicken breast. Like, it was not good.
Well, we are getting on to our hour, but
Oh, wow.
before we close out, you did a poem the other day when we were in the Slam Jam space,
Yes.
and actually you did a couple, but I don't remember. I can't remember a word from it. I just remember like
Was
being
it the one about being the one that basically starts, take a good look at me? What do you see?
So,
My hair, my glasses, my humanity, or just the great bulk of me?
yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
I can pull that one up. Yeah, no problem. I
But
don't have that one fully committed to
before
memory.
we get to that point to close out, is there anything that you want to talk about with your own social justice causes or charities you support or anything you want to highlight?
Gosh, I think we've already covered so much of it that basically all the causes I support, they're disparate and they're many, but they come down to the basic understanding of kindness and that the idea of normal is so different than it used to be, that we are varied and distinct people who lead different lives, and we have to create space for that. And that if we solve problems with compassion rather than punishment, then we really elevate what it means to be human. That so much of the narrative we tell ourselves is about fear. I saw a great quote the other day, and I wish I could attribute it, but I can't. That was talking about Ursula K. Le Guin and how they posed this theory that maybe the first tool that we invented wasn't a spear or a knife. Maybe it was a bag for holding things we gathered. It's like that Margaret Mead quote. What was the first sign of civilization? A broken bone, a healed broken bone, because it meant that rather than leaving that person to die, that society cared for them. They healed them, and then that person was able to continue on. That the stories we've told ourselves that posit violence and selfishness as our only modifiers aren't true. They're just stories, and we can tell new stories. And so I hope to be a part of that conversation. But yes, hold on, let me pull up that. Oh, here it is. Okay. This is called What Do You See? Take a look at me. What do you see? My glasses, my hair, my humanity, or just the great bulk of me? Another fat poet with a poem about obesity. A cliche at this point, but realistically, it's almost as if the way we look affects the way you hear the things we say, so we have to say them repeatedly. It makes a sort of sense to me, this listening selectively, if you think the only cause of obesity is an inability to stop eating, just gluttony. If you think the majority of adults over 33 are simply lazy, or you don't understand the science behind diets being mostly self defeating, that our bodies are designed to hold on to the energy we're eating. My mother treats my issues with food like an addiction. In many ways, I don't disagree. My relationship with food is complicated, admittedly. But the problem for me and so many like me is that an abstinence approach isn't possible. You see, if you had to face your addiction every day, multiple times, just to survive, how strong would you be? How many times could you deny an overwhelming hunger before you just didn't try? Now they've put me on Ozempic, and for the very first time, I've heard the silence of the sated. See, there's something inside me that has never stopped screaming, that has never felt full, a biological keening for more and more and more. And though I know intellectually that I've had enough, my body has never agreed. If you asked if I could eat, the answer was always yes, emphatically. The first time I said no, could say honestly, I am not hungry, tears pricked my eyes because I had believed those lies that said the failure was wholly mine. But there is more to this problem than simple calorie lines or self indulgent crimes, so I inject a drug into the flesh of my stomach, the part of me I am supposed to despise, that makes me nauseous frequently, with side effects a bit scary. A few days of vomiting every week, is this really more healthy? Or have I just signed up for another eating disorder, this one supervised medically? Really? That they won't give me until there is less of me, so I take my meds diligently, watch the weight slide off slowly, deal with the demons that have been hiding behind my now silent hunger. I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm grateful if you believe me. All I'm asking is to be treated with the dignity due every person inherently. Stop trying to hide me if you want to sleep with me. Don't deny me access to the spaces and places you get to go regularly. If I break my arm, just set the damn bone. Don't patronize me with talk of healthy eating while I sit there in agony. When strangers start hurling cruelty, speak up for me because self advocacy gets so very lonely. Don't agonize over my physical health at the cost of my mental well being. Treat me holistically because realistically, I will never be thin. I will never fit in. It is too late for me to achieve the kind of shape you think I should be in. So if your concern is out of caring, then care about what is within. If you want me at your table, make some space for me to fit in, or recognize that my absence is your choice. It's your sin.
Yes. I love that piece.
See, that one's interesting because I wrote that one and then it sat in my drafts for over a year. And I pulled it out one day randomly and was like, for I think it was for Slam Jam or a similar open mic, and was like, you know what? I'll give this one a shot. See how it resonates. And it was really well received. So I dusted it off, did a little bit of tweaking, and I think I'm going to take that one to my next slam.
I think it should. I think it's an absolutely brilliant piece. And it, I mean, it definitely resonates with me, living in the space as someone who's been overweight my entire life, except for a brief period in college when I dieted my way down to a size 6 and was the angriest human being you've ever seen in your life.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine.
It was hateful. I was so mean. It was not worth living at that size to be the asshole that I was.
Well, and that's just it. Like people point to that and they say it's possible, but they don't understand the cost you have to pay to maintain that figure. And I've always understood that because I've watched my mom struggle with her weight. I've watched my aunts struggle with their weight. I've seen aunts do it successfully, but they have spent their entire life eating broiled chicken breasts with no skin on it. You know what I mean? Like they've done it, but at what cost? And then I have my father who has basically been a string bean while eating every Big Mac he's ever seen. Like, like it's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
It's an
Um,
absolute crapshoot.
I'm really glad that you are putting those words out into the world because they need to be heard. And you say them with such a, they don't come across as bitter.
Hmm, I'm
In
glad.
a different mouth, coming out of a different mouth, those sentiments could come across as bitter, but they don't come across as bitter coming from you. They come across as something that just makes me think, makes me recognize, makes me just realize. And I hope that they do that for others as well.
Thank you. That means so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
I threw a link in the chat to the Six Poet Society session on Facebook if anybody wants to sign up. No commitment. It's totally free. Do what
Is
you
that
want to do.
tonight? Is that a tonight?
No, it is next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday. Okay.
Next Tuesday, we have a session. And
Second.
I'm releasing a collection in August. So I threw a link to that if you are interested. Again, no pressure. I hate the self-promotion thing, but it is a necessity. So
That
it's
is
in there if anyone is interested.
fantastic. So briefly tell everyone real quick where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram at Kelly Mary McAllister. You can also find me at kellymarymcallister.ca. You can also get my book through kellymarymcallister.ca. It's going out in August. We're shipping out at the end of the month, so we should be good there. And this has been such a wonderful hour. You've asked such poignant, lovely questions. Thank you to both Whisper and Catalyst and Sophia for being so wonderful and for creating such a great space to highlight some of the amazing artists that are coming out. I look forward to being here next time.
Thank you so much for being with us and for helping kick off the second part of our first year. It's going to be an exciting ride, and you got to be at the top of the roller coaster.
Ooh.
Thank you so much. Much love. I'm so glad that I got to know you better. It has been a lot of fun, and I look forward to doing that even more.
Me too.
So, this has been the Heart of the Artist. Thank you so much for being here. And bye until next time. Peace, love, and poetry.
Peace, love, and poetry.